quickly, let's look at some of his achievements. Pretty much Lee has won every leadership award on offer in the RAN. From when he was a young cadet commanding, he was a senior cadet at the Defence Academy at the Royal Australian Naval College. He's won Swords of Excellence. He's commanded 2 Australian warships, HMAS Parramatta and HMAS Perth. In fact, on HMAS Parramatta, he was awarded the best ship in the fleet, just like Captain Abrashov. He has served overseas in the Middle East. He was a guest a lecturer, teaching fellow at the US Navy War College. And his penultimate role in the Navy before he moved on was as the Commander Maritime Border Command. Lee's now working in the Minderoo Foundation as the head of partnerships and operations. So it's my pleasure to introduce Lee today. Thank you, Lee, for coming and welcome. And this opportunity now is, as I said, just to ask some questions of Lee. And I'm going to kick it off because I do have a question, and it reflects back to something Sean said earlier. Sean earlier said something when we were talking about ABC connections. He mentioned that people want to be part of a movement. And the way that we become part of a movement is when we really nurture and connect with those, particularly those B's and C's. So my question of you, Lee, you were commanding officer of HMAS Parramatta. You were the best ship in the fleet. You won the Gloucester Cup back in 2008. How did you create a movement on that ship, and how did you connect the B's and C's, all those sailors, because you had about 200 people on that ship? How did you do that? What was the magic, Lee?
Well, thanks, Coach Adrian, and thanks, Coach George and Coach Luke. And I actually joined for that whole session for last hour. So actually, it's by far the most important thing I've done, not just this today, but also this week. Can I make first one comment? I'm going to show you this to virtuously signal, to say, oh no, good, I'm on the blue bus. I just realised I'm not on the blue bus. And actually, you've got to remind yourself, and I went through the program about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I haven't revisited it the way I should have or discussed it with my team. And I've just asked my team, which I might come back to give you some comments. Some of it's quite cutting. So I just want to make sure I keep it real here as well. But look, to address your about the challenge of, say, being on a ship or a confined environment or with a team, and how do you get the most out of them? I think there's 2 things. And Adrian, thanks very much for the introduction of myself. It's far more than I deserve. But the interesting thing in life is people really, in the end, after you've read out my bio, I might remember it, my mother might remember it, and maybe one other person, but they actually want to remember what I achieved. They'll remember how I achieved it. And that's the big difference. It's not what you achieve, it's actually how you achieve it. When you're a captain of a warship, and often I've been asked by up-and-coming commanding officers, or I was an up-and-coming commanding officer, and I wish I'd asked these questions, what is success? How do you actually know you've got a successful, high-performing team? And I say it's actually really quite, it's quite poignant, because you may have a young female or male sailor on board, and the first day you come on board as a captain, they may be with their parents, and as you walk past, they say, that's the captain. But you know you're successful at some stage in your 2 years. It may be the first month, but maybe towards the end. When you walk past that young sailor with their parents, they don't say that's the captain, they say that's my captain. That's my captain. And I think that really, for me, if I achieved that in both the times that I was either commanding warships or big fleets, etc., that's what I'm most proud of. And that's probably when I was most blue myself, and I think the team around me was blue as well. And by the way, I'm not trying to overstate my success. I reckon I've put teams into the blue in 3 weeks. I've struggled to get teams out of the green and red after 6 months. So we all, got to put in perspective as well. It's staying in the blue is aspirational sometimes as well, as much as reality. But I'll leave it there, Adrian.
Very accessible to your crew, and I wonder how you achieve that. Did you achieve it by staying in your office and inviting them to come and visit you, or were you actually walking in their shoes? Were you there with them, doing, seeing what they were doing and working with them? How did you do that?
Yeah, first of all, Adrian was very kind talking about my leadership successes. We probably would need the rest of the day if I told you about my leadership failures and my bad days, because not every day is a good day. So could I just tell one story about being a captain of a warship?
Yeah.
It was about 1990, and of course Adrian was in the Navy a few years ahead of me, and very highly decorated helicopter pilot. But he probably hasn't told you that. But I was in the Malacca Strait as a midshipman, and we were going through the Malacca Strait. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. There were ships everywhere. And it was all going badly. And I was the very junior officer on the bridge, and the captain was called to the bridge. And it was a guy called Captain Chris Oxenbould. And the bridge, everyone on the bridge parted, and the captain grabbed his binoculars, went to the front window, and calmly looked out. And it was all going bad. Everyone stopped talking, and everyone looked at the back of his head, and everyone thought, that's the captain. He's in control. And everyone, he didn't say anything. Everyone started doing all the right things. It was quite remarkable to see it. Fast forward 20 years later, I just joined HMAS Parramatta, Malacca Strait, not far actually from that area, all going badly, 3 o'clock in the morning. We kind of, the junior officer kind of lost control, which happens sometimes. They called me to the bridge. I grabbed the binoculars. The bridge parted, went to the front window. Everyone was looking at the back of my head thinking, wow, that's our captain. I was looking through the window going, what the hell do I do now? So, so I realised 20 years earlier, I actually spoke to Captain Oxenbould. So the reality is you've got to keep it real. You've got to be very genuine, authentic. If you're not naturally a person that bounces around every day, to go see the men and the women where they are, it's not authentic. Or if you're a person that naturally, is doing it too often, often, and you try and pull back and be this big, stern captain in your cabinet, it's not authentic either. So, I mean, you've ridden a horse to a certain extent where you are as a leader. You should actually continue to ride that horse, but just be aware of your environment. I think that's very important. Captain at sea is a little bit different because there actually is the privileges, by the way, and I think it's been written. There are some privileges, but of course, versus actually the responsibility, etc. as well. So you try and balance that up. But there is actually a slight act there as well. The expectation that the captain is the authority, the lead, and when it's all going kind of not well, like I said on the bridge, that you can turn to that one lady or man to make sure that there's a leader at the time. And of course, that's nurtured over a long time. In fact, when I became a captain, another story is that often I would say things in that first couple of months, and I go, where did that come from? That sounds really good. But you realise you kind of been nurtured, and all that experience drives you to that point. Look, the other thing if I was being asked by an up-and-coming commanding officer or any of you about how you can actually get into a rhythm of really getting to know your people, I made a point of having at least 5 deep, meaningful conversations with the people I either worked with or worked for me every single day. And you need to do that to really know your people. In fact, that exercise with the pyramid about frontline workers being the most stressed, etc., the most, that's a really good point, because I often found that your most junior people, they may not behave bad. They may make a mistake during the day, or they may arrive work for late. 99% of the time, they had no intention of having a bad day. But before you throw them under the bus, you actually have to understand what's happening in their lives. Why have they behaved differently? What's different, etc. as well. And I think that's when to be fair, that's sometimes when I failed as a leader. You've gone straight after bad behaviour, or you made an assumption, but you realise you actually haven't stopped. You actually have to understand why your people actually behave and what's really important to them. So I think that mantra of actually having 5 real conversations, every single day with 5 people, and also not just your verticals. We get so focused on our verticals, people down below you, and actually people above you. Your horizontals are actually the critical ones, your peers. Make sure you really know your peers. And I think that's another mistake of mine. I think I'm pretty good when it comes to verticals. I don't think I've always been as good as I could be in the horizontals.
Inspires you to keep going every day. And can I ask it personally? Like, what gets you out of bed every day, just personally, but also professionally, to keep going and doing what you're doing?
Yeah, look, I think you have to, I think we may have all gone through at some point in our lives a kind of a purpose statement, and what is your purpose? And for me, it's always been 3 words rather than actually a statement. And the reason why I kind of joined, I guess, the military as a 17-year-old, now remarkably, almost 35 years ago. And I guess for me, it was about service, and I generally, service. Secondly is about adventure. And thirdly is about being part of high-performing teams. I'm not necessarily leading or being just simply part of those. So I think, and I've got that in spades through the Navy and Defence and working with government, and whether it be operations or even those, those tough days. And by the way, professionally and life full stop. It's not always a good day. There's been great weeks, great months. But even with the Minderoo Foundation, which is, of course, is Australia's largest impact philanthropy, I still get that excitement of service, making a difference, venture, pushing the edge, and then being part of high-performing teams. And I think that's really important. And by the way, one of my failings is I actually do like being part of high-performing teams, and you've got to be very careful that you can actually be judgmental of that as well, or overstate your own. But I think that's what really gets me energised. And there's a couple of other personal things as well. I mean, I actually generally do like it when you see the next generation coming through. The same Navy seeing a 22, 23-year-old female or male on the bridge and thinking, wow, where did that come from? Just by our mentoring, our example, whatever, they are doing all those things. And by the way, we just need to get out of their way now. So I think those are the kind of things that really get you excited as well. So, yeah.
Thank you very much.
How did you take your messages across to your whole team? Because there would be a hierarchy where you would have different positions. Now, if you wanted to give a message to your team, how would you make sure that people connect with it and trust that?
Yeah, look, and I think the modern military, first of all, I think the hierarchy is probably different from perhaps it was maybe 20, 30 years ago or in the movies. I think the leadership style, I think most modern military leaders is more motivational and situational versus hierarchical and direct. There is a time, so giving people what they need, not what they want. And I might tell a story about that when you've got to be very, very direct. I think especially in a big organisation, and say when I was commanding, say, a surface fleet, you might have 3,000 or 4,000 people. You got to have in your back of mind, how do you get to the last 40? How do you get to the last 40? You've actually got to work that out. And then you've got to test yourself to make sure you have got to the last 40 as well. And there's a whole lot of ways you can do that. You can speak in front of all 3,000 or 4,000 and probably annoy them because they had to stand to attention for 2 hours, or you could actually, do a wide email, or there's a whole lot of ways you can do that. And of course, for those 3,000 or 4,000 people, they're all going to receive your communication differently as well. Yeah. So I think the most important thing is to communicate. And you probably need to err slightly on not over communicating, but making sure you are communicating regularly and well and clearly versus not. Because then, the Australians, by the way, especially young Australians, if you over communicate, they'll tell you. But boy, if you don't communicate, they will really tell you you're not communicating. So you need to really be aware of that. And they have mechanisms to make sure your communication is coming. I'll go back to Captain of the Warship. On a Captain of the Warship, everyone will laugh at your jokes, even though you're not funny. And everyone will tell you you're communicating well, even though you're probably not. So you need to have somebody next to you, a confident, and either a horizontal or a junior person you really trust, and you've got a great relationship. Or in the case of a warship, you often will have a warrant officer, and they are the ones who will tell you, you weren't funny today, even though they were laughing, and you thought you're communicating well and came across this way, but it's actually received this way. So I think they're the special mechanisms. And also set a tone where if somebody does give you that direct feedback, you don't bite. You actually, can take 10 seconds, get, and actually receive it, in the spirit that it's actually intended as well. So yeah, communication though, it's Australians in particular, they can be a tough bunch. It's having seen different groups around the world. So and you won't get it right every day. You'll. I reckon most of the time, even if you think you're good, you're only communicating well about 80% of the time. You have to remind yourself that. About 20% of the time, you're not communicating well. It doesn't matter how good you think you are.
Go ahead.
Hi. You may have already covered this in a couple of things, but specifically with COVID and the lockdown, just wondering, has that changed how intentional you've been? Have you had to be more intentional? And very similar to the last question, how have you then reached everybody during COVID? Just curious.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Sarah. And I think, we'll be, first of all, we'll be talking about this, over the next few years, and we'll be masking other issues, I think, through, over communication versus issues that actually existed in the first place. That's the first thing. So, and of course, there is all, disruption. There's always opportunity as well. I think the first thing is you need to communicate far more slowly and clearly in this virtual environment, and you need to be, you're just found wanting. If you're not actually focused and, and really in the right mindset when you're communicating like this, you're just going to be found wanting. That's the most important thing. I think that's one. Second observation, let's be frank, those high-performing teams before COVID who were communicating well have accelerated. Those teams that weren't high-performing and weren't communicating well have actually gone like that. And everyone will blame it for different reasons. So I think there's some fundamentals there. And of course, starting, the other issue, of course, in this kind of remote environment is how do you onboard people and really get them to sense the culture? That's whether it be the water cooler talk, etc. as well. I think that needs to be the real focus. Setting it up. You can't just simply have a team member, come in and all of a sudden join a Zoom of 10 and just expect it. You're just going to absorb the culture. So I think you need to focus on those areas. Focus on the opportunities. People don't like their time wasted either. So if you're going to meet together, you want to make sure it counts, for everyone. So and you can do that by everyone will have a set of principles about how you behave, etc. But I think if you are going to have those principles, make sure you do behave in accordance with them, and make sure you have mechanisms where people can actually say if you're not, and actually you can be called on it as well. I think that's important. So technology is pretty remarkable. If we allow this disruption, there's going to be some fantastic opportunities here as well.
Amazing, thank you.
Ask, what has been your greatest challenge in life, and how has that affected you both personally and professionally?
I think for all of us, we'll all have a secret garden. I think the actual I'll turn to the actual realization about what my challenge has been before. I think my greatest professional challenge in recent times has been the Hobbit's golden ring. You get to a certain level at the top, and then you actually want something, and you start to change and behave differently. And until you actually realize that, you've got to be really, really conscious of it as a leader. When you're actually starting to change your behavior, especially as you get to that kind of pyramid at the top. And I've done in Canberra the last 4 years, and I'm sure Adrian can tell stories, etc., about the same kind of experience. And we've talked about it personally as well. You start to change, and then realizing that the person that you once were, you're starting to change, or you're not that person anymore. And I don't think I got too far away from it, but I've certainly seen people around me put the Hobbit's conversation. So the challenge for me was actually the actual realization that the best time of your life is not ahead of you or not behind you, it's right now. So the leader that you are, the family person that you are, the person that you are, the friend you are, it's actually where you are right now. Whether you're on the blue bus or the green bus going to the blue bus, or your actual realization of the red bus, that's the most important thing. As I said, you can either be reflective on the past, entitlement, or you're living on past glories, or you could be so thrusting on the future, you lose sight of what's really important right now. So I think the personal and professional challenge for me over the last couple of years, actually, I've just gone past 50, and I'm sure others have just gone through that period, actually realizing what's really important right now. I've also had, challenges professionally, in terms of we've had to show courage in terms of your ethics and morals and making sure your values, and not being a tacit observer. I can tell you times when I probably have been, and also courage actually physically, say, in an operation, and especially when you're looking after other people, and many of us can share. I'm sure we've all got experiences there as well, and that does, sometimes that does keep you up at night as well. So but I think having the courage to actually really look at yourself and not over adjust, but actually be frank and then make the changes that you need to, I think is an important challenge. And certainly I've probably done that 3 or 4 times over the last 30 years, and we all do it. As I said, we can all talk about our successes, but it's really important to talk about our bad days as well, and understand why they were so.
Awesome, thank you.
right, thanks, Lee. Is there?
I really appreciate your contribution, and I really thank you for your service. And I hope that in the future, you tell your story a bit more, because it's very inspirational.